far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Hello and welcome to another 100 ABC Women Fireside Chats. I'm Sarah Onyango, one of the regular moderators of these wonderful fireside chats. And today in this episode, we are going to be talking about Canada's immigration system and specifically advocating for children, youth, and young people like international students in the immigration system. And one of the reasons we're having this conversation is because, right, Canada has one of the highest rates of immigration in the world. I mean, that's a given. And the average age of the immigrant population is younger than that of Canadian-born citizens. So young immigrants are a demographic factor. They weigh heavily on the scale. So to have this conversation, we've invited two very knowledgeable panelists who happen to be 2024 100 ABC Women honorees. Olaitan Onyebu is the director and founder of Seventh Laurel Immigration, a Black female-led immigration consulting firm based in New Brunswick. She'll tell us more about that. Olaitan immigrated to St. John from Nigeria in 2014 as an international student to the University of New Brunswick's MBA program, majoring in entrepreneurship and technology management. She founded her first business, Oak Ridge Consulting, where she helped settle over 100 international students in Canada from inception to date. She is the visionary and pioneer president of the Black Business and Professional Network, Inc., vice president of the Nigerian Canadian Association of New Brunswick, and a mentor with SJMNC Jumpstart Program and Study and Stay New Brunswick program. She's a wife, a mother of three, and she's very passionate about empowering immigrants. Welcome to the show. And our other panelist is Dr. Boluaji Olaniru, originally from Nigeria. She is a professor at Conestoga College, Kitchener-Waterloo, Dunes campus. She teaches liberal studies at the Liberal Studies School of Interdisciplinary Studies Department. Her years of research on the discontinuation of female genital mutilation or cutting, FGM-C, stems from her interest in healthcare, gender equality, women's emancipation, children's rights, and humanitarian aid. And besides her academic affiliations, she presents at conferences, she writes scholarly pieces, and she has recently produced and directed a film entitled Ishe Abe. She'll tell us more about that. And she is also one of the directors at Women Focus Canada Incorporated, which is a Canadian nonprofit charity organization focusing on women's emancipation. Welcome to the two of you. So I know we're going to be bandying around different terms connected to immigration, but Olaitan, since you are the immigration professional per se, I'd like you to give us a general lay of the land in terms of what does the immigration system look like in Canada, and then what are the different types of status that people can have inside that system.
Thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's nice to meet everyone. Hi, my co-panelist, Dr. Bolu. Canada immigration is really something that matters to sustainability of the economy of Canada, given that it helps to support aging population. It also helps to meet some labor and skill shortages, while also contributing to empowering and boosting the education system through, diverse set of international students that get recruited annually, as well as also support tourism and all that. Based on that, there are different categories when it comes to pathways to immigrating to Canada. We have the category of the temporary pathway where you see the study, the work, the visitor category. We also have the permanent residency that oftentimes the temporary residents, which I fell into that category when I arrived in 2014 as an international student, and I navigated through being a temporary resident to becoming a permanent resident. So we also have that pathways that also contributes to it. Like we also have sponsorship under the permanent residency, sponsoring a family member, as well as we have the citizenship route. After a certain time, the permanent residents status holders have the opportunity, if they love to be a Canadian citizen, to become Canadian. Then we also have the people who situations in their homeland often make them to seek refuge in Canada, while they're escaping hardship. So they come through as refugees. And that is why the name IRCC is a definition that captures the very essence of different status, which is Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. So that alone, that definition captures the different status. And we also have the economic route, wherein people who may necessarily doesn't want to come in through the route of being a temporary resident, study their way through. They just want to invest. There are people that are venture capitalists. They want to set up a business. They just, so those are the different pathways. And there are different subsets of this category. And if you're looking for broader information around that, I would invite you to visit canada.ca, where you see everything. But by and large, immigration is good for the economy of Canada because it helps to fill those gaps that the aging population and other needs cannot be met by the current populace.
Thank you very, very much for that. That sort of gives us a good sense. And yes, we would like to reiterate that this information that you're going to be hearing is for just general information, and that if you have a specific case, please go to official websites, official channels, and one of them being IRCC. So Dr. Bolu, one of the classes that Olaitun mentioned was international students, which happens to be your focus. So can you tell us about the different categories of international students? Because it's not just, one group of people.
Yes, for sure. There are different various statuses of international students. A lot of times when we think international students, we assume they're the young students coming out of secondary school and going into university or college, but we also have mature students as well. We have students who maybe they want to change their career paths, right? Or get themselves in a different, maybe job opportunity. So we have older, there's different ranges and there's different reasons, right? Some people want to change, some people want a new opportunity, some people want to explore different areas, some people want to continue, but get maybe experience in this country, right? So I see people that are in PSW, bridging to nursing, that have already accredited nursing certificates back home, right? And they want to continue it here. So they come back to school and they get themselves involved in the programs to take it so that it would qualify them to start practicing here as well. So there's different reasons as to why, and different age categories as to why we have a lot of international students.
Mm-hmm. So can you give us a sense of what you're seeing? Because all three of us, it just so happens, all three of us were international students. I was an international student in the early 80s, mid 80s to late 80s. You guys might have come a little later, but what have you seen in terms of changes with regard to these young people, especially the younger international students?
Sorry, one clarification. I'm actually not an international student,
Oh,
but
sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But I have seen like a shift in general in terms of the school I'm at right now. We have a lot of younger international students, so coming out of secondary school and this being their first time in a post-secondary institution. And I'm seeing a lot of burdens on them, financial burdens, maybe expectations of academics, right? Back home, maybe the way they were taught was different from the way they're taught here. And they kind of come with that same system. And when they're here, they realize that system doesn't work. And now back home, they're getting A's, and here they're struggling to keep up to meet the minimum, right? And again, social pressures. The environment is different, language barrier, right? Some people coming from different areas may not understand my tonation, might not understand the way I teach. There's different teaching methods. So there's a lot of different things that kind of make the experience very overwhelming for them. So that being said, I'm seeing a lot of people suffering from different types of mental health issues, right? Depression, anxiety, they're unstable, they're unsure, they're overwhelmed, they can't perform well because of these things. So I believe that the major difference, I think, right now is there's an influx. I don't think back then the influx was as huge as it was back then, which is, the government came in and made some new rules in terms of reducing the amount of people that are allowed to come into the country. So I think in terms of there being an influx right now, I think the expectations, especially for a lot of them, is very different. Oh, I never knew Canada was like this. I never knew this. I never knew that. So the misinformation as well. They're not getting that information back home. They're coming in with that mentality that it's just like back home, but in Canada. And then they get here and they realize it's completely different.
Yeah. And speaking of information pre-departure, can I get a sense from Olaitan, like what are you hearing from your clients when they arrive and they start struggling in terms of what they were told at the point of departure?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think this is very, very important that we as support system that has been recognized by the government of Canada as authorized paid representative to also know that we owe our client a duty of care to do the needful in terms of educating, not just treating them as a business as usual. I'm done representing you. You have your visa, then off you go. My journey through my international students is more of a partnership, making sure before I became an RCIC, I saw something through my lived experiences, coming into a land where I have never experienced before with two toddlers, age 2 and 4, in an intensive MBA program, a 2-year that was condensed into one. And my husband being my sponsor far away in Africa working, it was a whole lot of mistakes. I fell so many times through, but I told myself, hey, I would be that platform where people will get to know the reality undiluted. So that was what Oakridge Consulting was doing, and I was making sure. But certain instances where you have applicant go through some ghost agents, we don't call them consultant because they're not even authorized to practice. They just treat every client as job description and they move on. Such candidate from such an information delinquent unit where they patronize ghost consult, they come in with the mentality that once you get to Canada, everything is going to happen so quick for you, you'll be fine. You start making money, money drops from the tree, and then they come in to get the huge shock. Adapting to a new community is stressful on its own. Then the fact that the expectation that you came in for is not the reality adds to the pressure. And that's what Dr. Bolu said, that most of them, they feel so stressed. Their mental health is nothing to write home about. They can't even concentrate. I myself, I was very okay because I had my research done 3 years prior to moving to Canada. I researched all the schools in Canada to ensure that we're living within the limit of our budget. But still, I had that shock. I ran into some of those things that Dr. Bolu mentioned. Now, I would implore and recommend that if you are in charge of working with international students, the exchange rate coming from developing countries where these students come from is a huge stress on its own. A situation where you have school fees of like, let's say 25,000. When you convert it in Naira or other currency, we're already looking at 25 million Naira. That alone is stressful. Help your student to succeed. Hold them. 3 days ago, I got a call from my client saying, Olaiton, thank you so much because you gave me the reality. Even when my colleagues were complaining, I already knew what I was coming for. That alone warms my heart because I didn't just take them as job description. So please help them prepare for that reality. Tell them as it is. If they're not ready this year, let them come back next year. Show them the data, show them the survey. If you don't have 50 million, don't bother this year. Go save. Don't say because you want to collect the money this year and I will do what I can do.
I see
Please.
Dr. Bolu nodding because you mentioned international students and she had just talked about the unrealistic expectations. Is there something you want to add in that regard?
Just like Olaton was saying, it's very true. I think a lot of times, because whenever I sit down with my students for icebreakers, I like to have all these conversations. Why you in this program? Why did you choose to come here? And, just let's be a little bit vulnerable and get to know each other more. And a lot of them will say, oh, I heard it was easy. I heard it was a cheaper school. They have none of them really come with that concrete, well, I did my research and this is why I want to be here, right? It's more so, well, I heard it was easy to get your PR. This was the fastest way, all these things. And then you see them really frustrated because they're not really, they didn't come with the mindset of coming here to study, right? But studying is a major component of you being in this country. It's not going to work, right? So I think that mentality, right, gets them a lot frustrated. And especially with the new government rules that came in right now, we're seeing there's a decline in international students coming in.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah,
tell us about the changes in policy.
Yeah, so the change in policy, the major one is the number of people that are allowed to come in. So right now they have it at 360,000 students that can come in. So that's a decrease of 35% of what we were having before. Yes. So it's not only the decrease, but now the requirements, right? You have to have, I think it's like 20,000 Canadian, like stashed, right? The equivalent of that stash, untouched. And that's going to cater for your living expenses, right? Doesn't include your plane tickets. You have to pay your tuition, right, in full. And before, I think you only had to pay like maybe a semester. Now they're asking for the full year. And then they're telling you that, guess what, when you get here too, you can't work as many hours as you want to. We've reduced that now to, 20 hours. And a lot of things are shifting. Whereas prior to that, it was kind of a free-for-all. You get here, right? And it was a bit easier for them. But now it's getting a lot harder. So you're seeing a lot of them that are coming in right now very frustrated because they came here on the idea and hopes based off what maybe they heard or friends or relatives have been doing in the past. And now everything has changed and they don't know where to start from or where to go. So you'll have students that come and say, I can't afford to fail this course because I don't have any more money. This is my final year. Right? And it's like, well, you weren't showing up to class. Well, I couldn't show up to class because I was busy working in order to have money to pay for the course. So it's this catch-22, right? And unfortunately, if they fail the course, it's a whole immigration thing where they may be deported back home for not meeting up to the. So there's a lot. So a lot of them are stressed. There have been a number of suicides because there's some students who they were the hopes of their families. Their families have sold land, have sold everything in order to gather the money, have borrowed from people to send them here to go to school on the hopes of what they imagined this place to be. And the reality settle in when they come here and they're like, wow, it's not actually like Instagram or social media or Twitter is suggesting it to be. And now they're frustrated. And now the expectations of them, they can't meet back home. Oh, I borrowed money from so-and-so. We need that money back. And it's like, do you know how much we make here per hour? I can't get as many hours. I have times 3 of the regular, tuition for domestic students because I'm an international student. It's a lot of pressure on them. And they can't go back home because there's nothing to go home to, right? So a lot of them are so depressed that there's been an increase in, suicides. And unfortunately, because of that, and again, they're not aware of the resources available at the school, people to talk to, people to vent to.
Yeah, thanks for that. We're going to get back to the mental health issue with regard to international students, but also with regard to immigrants and refugees. But before that, can we go back to Olaitan to talk about who are the different players in the immigration system who are involved in, processing, a file and helping the immigrant or the refugee settle? Who are the different actors?
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to keep locking a statement leading to refugee cases with what Dr. Bolu said around some students that are unable to complete their education. Some even stop attending classes and they run off to go declare refugee status, because they realize they cannot go back home and they cannot continue the pressure. I received an update recently about even some 2 students in an Ontario-based institution that only attended classes twice and they stopped attending. Sometimes I get emails from students that says, I just arrived. My funder said he doesn't have money again and I have to stop school. And a friend told me to travel down to maybe an Atlantic region where I can just work. So those are the cases that you see as well. And it becomes a case of those numbers adding up to the people that are filing for refugees. And this is what is leading to some of the measures that the policymakers and the state actors are literally putting in to just reduce the number of international students. I know in my province, there was a time before this whole thing blew into this level, some of the schools, a college actually stopped accepting students from Nigeria and Ghana. They stopped admission for 2022-3 way since 2022 before it blew into this proportion. So I'm going to come back. So for us, that international student aspect also has been an aspect where students cannot afford it and they have no choice to just stay back and want to declare refugee. You asked about this principal actors. The Immigration, Refugee and Protection Act and the regulation empowers immigration officers and the Minister for Immigration, to manage all departments when it comes to, processing immigration applications, settlement of immigrants. And IRCC through various departments, which is the legal, the administrative side, they work with various, provincial organizations to help with settlement of these immigrants. So when it comes to application principles around that, the Minister of Immigration, acting through each immigration officers, hired by IRCC, and which is the Department of the Government of Canada, manages applications. And when it comes to refusals or removal and all that, there are different departments when it comes to that could help. If you believe that the decision that has been made by the officer is something that you do not agree to or that is contestable, you have the opportunity, depending on your class of status. If you're the temporary resident applicant, you have the option to get our legal professionals to go to the federal courts, through a process we call a judicial review, to review your application. I have seen in the past a lot of students have leveraged this route, and in recent time we've seen a lot of Black legal experts, working to support and go defend the rights of some people that have been unjustly handed down a decision that, even when you look at the criteria, the metrics under the Immigration Acts, these people literally meet this requirement. But then the discretional side that the officer has been empowered by the law could be something that you can go to court to request a review of the application, or that the judge sets aside that decision for another officer to re-examine. Those instances are available through the legal side. On the refugee side and also the permanent residency side, we have the Immigration Refugee Board, we have the Immigration Appeal Division, we have the Refugee Protection Division, we have the Refugee Appeal Division as well. And we also have the people that also addresses some unjust detention of immigrants. And I think in recent time, there has been some provincial leaders that are also scrapping the aspect of detention, for applicants. That's another, let's leave that aside. But I'm just trying to talk about the various divisions that you have and various recourse that an average applicant could have if you believe that your decision deserves a reconsideration. And it is done. It has happened before. We have seen it. And I always recommend that people make sure they read through, go on the website of IRCC, canada.ca, to learn about all of these things, to know your rights and to know when to seek help. Like Dr. Bolu said, Instagram is not the way to go. Social media is not the way to go. There are a lot of people that are just barely in Canada on temporary, even as a visitor. The moment they arrive in Canada, they set a ring light and they start saying all kinds of things. Please don't take them on face value. Do your due diligence yourself. I yield back to you, Sarah. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's go back to Dr. Bolu, since the topic here is not just immigration, but advocating for children and young people. And you talked about the category of international students who are mature students. So I'm guessing some of them have children. So how does that work?
Yeah, so for the ones that have children that are older, sometimes they bring them, sometimes they don't. So a lot of times when they do come here, one of the things is, okay, how do I get my children settled, right? What are the avenues? Because they can't come to class with me, and I can't leave them home. A lot of times they're younger, under the ages of 12, right? And they usually don't have their partners here. Their partners are usually back home. So it's kind of doing things on their own. So a lot of them will either get babysitters, right? But I always tell them to look into it. If you're here as a student, there should be, and maybe Alessa will be able to help me out with this, but there should be a way, if you do your research, to find them to be able to go to school. I believe if they come here as a student and they come with a dependent, depending on the age of the dependent, they should be able to go to whether it's elementary school or secondary school. So because a lot of them, again, they're unaware, right? They just say, oh, I got my visa for school and my son or my daughter too got their visa. So we all just came together because I can't leave them back home. But they're unaware of where they can place the children. So what are they doing? Oh, they're just at home. They're with my neighbor, someone from my church, or someone, that I spoke to online, because I can't bring them to class for just a few hours until I go back home, right? And I always tell them, I said, well, do your research. Like, what is available for you? You have to check these things out, right? Especially if you're going to bring them. You're not just coming for yourself, you're coming for them. What's available for them? It's not summertime, right? They should be in school or some type of, educational program, right? A daycare watching TV on the iPad, it's not really the way to go about it. So I think, and I believe one of the reasons why that happens specifically for, I think, my community is because I think sharing information is something that we kind of gatekeep, right? We don't really want other people to know. I don't know if it's fear of judgment or fear of, oh, maybe if we tell them they're going to take our spot and we won't have a spot again. So everyone kind of just gatekeeps, right? And I always advise them, I'm like, when you go to your churches, try to find community where you can, right? This is Canada, it's very big. Everyone's busy. The lifestyle here is different from where you're coming from, right? You can't expect the same thing. Here, you have to put effort and make intentional friends. You have to go in, whether it's going online, going for groups, joining, church, speaking to people, right? And getting the information you need. Because if you just sit down there quiet, nothing is going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I know you might feel, oh, I don't want to ask. You have to.
Yeah. You have to put your pride aside. But also people need to understand that there are also legal responsibilities you have as a parent. Here in Canada, you can't just behave like you're back home in the village or even in some town back home, right? Because back home, the government is not necessarily all that interested in what you're doing with your children, etc. Here, you might get that knock on your door.
Yes.
Why are your children not in school, etc.,
Or why did you
etc.?
leave them at home by themselves? They're only 12 and 8, and you're thinking, oh, back home, I leave them at home all the time and nothing happens. But here, it's an issue, right? So again, I always tell them, reach out. There's resources available. Even, sorry, but like my international students, sometimes when they're like complaining about things, I'm like, did you go to the school guidance counselor? Did you sit down with, the health center, the clinic at the school? There's things available. Check it out. Oh, I didn't know. How will you know? You have to literally, no one's gonna come and just tell you. You have to literally be intentional about seeking things. I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling sad. There's literally resources at school. If you don't use them, then it just goes to waste. You've already paid for this as part of your tuition. Go and use them.
Thanks very much for that. So back to Olaitan about family situations, right? Because lately there've been all these crazy cases of family reunification where you have these ridiculous wait times, and then you have children and young people who are separated from guardians and parents for inordinate amounts of time. So how does the advocacy work in those cases?
Thank you. The thing around family reunification is that the government of Canada, in fairness to them, takes it seriously, is one of the pillars for Canada immigration. Nonetheless, we have seen in the past that like wait time, I have been at the center of 3 instances where my husband has really needed to come around. I would give the instance of when I ran into an early labor for my youngest son was meant to arrive like 2 months. My husband just flew back to Nigeria like barely 3-4 days, and I found myself in an emergency situation. And as at that time, he came to land as a PR, which means the PR card was not available. And what that meant is he's not even going to be able to come back into Canada. And it was a serious emergency situation. He couldn't get in on time until after I'd gone through the surgery. The children were left to just be going from a friend's house today. They sleep in one friend's house today. The next minute, another person comes to pick them up. So it's even very, it's something that I have lived through like 3 times, I just feel like there are so many priorities that principal actors needs to put as, if you say this is one of our pillars, it is incumbent upon them to make sure that there is no excuse around delay, because oftentimes there is just a thin line between that family intervention that such people that are your taxpayers need, for things that could help with their life, like wellness, because some of the things we're talking about is, sometimes people could be vulnerable and they need that family support. Imagine immigrants, they are also like largest contributor of the GDP of, Canada. Yes, when you look at international students, I tell you how much, like Dr. Bolu can shed light on that. When there is a need for a family reunification to happen, the delay shouldn't be an excuse, in fairness and in principle. But that being said, we have seen instances where also there are certain persons that are also abusing the process and the system that makes the officer wants to apply a critical lens in, granting their decision. We've seen instances where there are arranged marriages in certain parts of the country of origin of these applicants. We've seen instances where in certain countries, quote and unquote, CELPI, IELTS, a young girl passing an IELTS could be a passport to becoming a bride of another Canadian citizen so she can come through. So there are so many dynamics that is also giving the decision makers and the state actors to look at. We need to ensure that we are bringing in the right people. So how then, which is a question which is like a food for thought, can we continue to stand in the gap to get the rights of these people, heard, is finding advocacy groups. Like we have one organization called the Black Africaners RCIC. It is a non-for-profit that just started by Jerusalem and Taisia right there in Ottawa. I am a member of that organization. What we try to do is to advocate for the rights of people that haven't vetted. That's why we look at it. Before you go argue for people, you need to look at the story, you need to look at the timeline and all that. So we walk through organizations like that to ensure that we advocate and we write all the emails to people. I have found myself in an instance where a woman passed on, an international student, I suppose, I think a temporary resident passed on a few days after, she gave birth to a beautiful baby, and there was no one on ground to support. That was my first pro bono case that I took on as an RCIC, making sure that I collated all the details, put in all the evidential information, and I reached out to my member of parliament to let them know the best interest of child here, which is something that the United Nations focuses critically on, is at stake. Imagine in a culture where a newborn needs to go through what we call omogwo, and is here in Canada, the mom is late. So we literally walk through. However, it took time too. It took so long, but then it happened. How the changes to timeline needs to happen is a function of what the Department of Government critically needs to look into, to look at what is working, to look at what is important, so they can make do. But if you ever have a need, feel free to reach out to me or BARCIC. They're on social media, Black Africaners RCIC, even some legal clinics too. They support people, Please reach out to your newcomer centers. In New Brunswick, we have New Brunswick Refugee Clinic. We have New Brunswick settlement centers across Ontario. I'm sure you have same.
Yes.
Please try that first.
So,
Acronym I mentioned, BARCIC, Black Africanness. RCIC means Regulated Canadian Immigration Consultants. We're
yes.
one of the three organizations or three representatives recognized to represent candidates. The Legal Law Society of Ontario and lawyers are also paralegals. They are also, and RISIAs, they are the ones for the school system that Dr. Bolu, I'm sure, would love to talk about as well.
Yeah. Thanks for telling us about regulated Canadian immigration consultants, right? Right. Yes. So speaking of Dr. Bolu, would you like to speak on that?
Um, just to piggy off what
Yeah.
Olaton said, yes. So at the school too, I remember when I went to Ryerson Style, I think Toronto, like PMO now, Toronto, can't even remember the acronym for that, but there were societies. We had the African Union Society, we had the Nigerian Union Society. So these were societies where we come together and we discuss issues that we're having, right? And then there would be someone that would represent us, maybe go to student union. Yes, Toronto Metropolitan University. Yes, that would go and represent this is the issues that we're facing or we're having issues. And there was also a place where people who came from who were African international students would have a place to speak up. These are issues I'm having. Does anybody know this? Does anybody know that? Right? So I feel like in all the schools, there should be like certain unions or societies or clubs that people should make use of, right? Don't say you don't have time or, oh, what do they have to offer? You never know. There are some people, I remember the head of our society that time used to be an international student, right? And he was the one getting everyone riled up. All right, Black History Month is coming up. What are we going to talk about? What do we want to represent? What are some of the issues that I can bring to student union that concern us? What do we want to be, So these are, and again, sharing information. As we come there, we talk and we, eat. We also talk about things that we're going through. People too will, hey, there's job opportunities here. Have you gone to this place? I want to invite you to this. Wait, it was a kind of a meeting ground for different types of resources, right? To exchange information, phone numbers, right? So I think too that for international students, if you do have those type of societies or communities, please make use of them. Because a lot of times they have information they can give you and they can be your spokesperson to maybe a higher channel if it's something that maybe you can't do by yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I'm going to go back to Olaitan to talk about an issue really that has come up quite a bit when it comes to young people. These cases of teenagers or young adults who are either born here or grew up here who find themselves being given a deportation order. Is that even, first of all, is that even legal? If the person is under 18, let's say, like, can you give us a sense of the lay of the land in terms of deportation and young people and how children are impacted by that?
Right, thank you so much. I was looking through an article some time ago around 2019 where in total, like worldwide, there was about 80 million of forcibly displaced individuals, globally. And out of that, about 80 million, we have like about 35 million that are children, under the age of 18 years old. And imagine that 5 years ago, and to think about what we could potentially have now. So for me, the question you asked, is it possible? Yes, it's possible, because if it wasn't possible, we would not have a case. One of the legal precedents that was set in a case of Baker versus Canada, and the Baker versus Canada was about around the situation where a woman that had 4 children here on this ground, Canada, a Jamaican woman, she came into Canada, maybe she sought asylum, and she was in Canada for 11 years as a domestic worker. And during that time was when she gave birth to 4 children. And when it was discovered that she was in Canada without status, she was ordered to be deported. And what that meant was that she needed to leave with the children. And imagine children that were born and raised here being ordered deported with a mom. Even if they were not going to go, who are they going to be with? So she had to seek judicial appeal to see if her case would be looked into and grant her some, at least they could stay the decision for the sake of the children. The appeal was denied, from the Court of Appeal and even I think the federal court. So it took the Supreme Court under the leadership of Justice Lures. She's the first judge in the Supreme Court from Quebec and the second female judge occupying that position. It took her in that year to literally effect the international law on best interests of child principle to really make that appeal stay. And what that means is, in the light of whatever happens, even if the parent at this point should be asked to leave, what is the impact of that decision on the life of the child? And this BIOC principle is something that the United Nations, literally encourage. When you look at UN article, I think Article 3.
On the rights of the child, yeah.
Yeah, it talked about that. So most times, lawmakers and even legal experts, they go out of their way to weigh those circumstances that could contribute maybe towards hardship to the child. And then some decisions are based off that. If you ever find yourself in such scenarios, I'm not saying you should go to the law court and start saying, because Olaito said Baker versus Canada is a case, and is really a celebratory case because over the years, it has really set the tone for social science lens, to base in decisions, not just legal, because the justice as at that time literally had to go outside of Immigration Protection Act and the Canadian law to bring that international law concept, to making sure that appeal was put in place. There are recourse for you to take if you ever find yourself in that situation as a refugee parent. Maybe you're facing deportation or you've been asked to leave. The humanitarian and compassionate side of the law could be something that you can get a lawyer to go through, to explore, to see how that could help. If you know you cannot afford a lawyer, reach out to all those law clinics for lawyers that could take on your case pro bono, or even there are some RCIC. If you look out for some RCIC with the IRB on their designation, I don't have that because I really don't see refugee as a case I really want to pursue now. I'm looking at it in future. But such RCIC right now, they could represent your interests at the IRB, Immigration Refugee Board. So reach out to them and weigh your options.
Thanks for that. And thanks for specifying to people that, immigration lawyers don't all, do the same kinds of cases, right? Some of them really are specialized in the refugee claimant cases. Others are the worker programs cases. Others are there's a variety. So make sure you know which immigration lawyer you're hiring to take on your case. Dr. Bolu, so we've started now with deportation, but I'd like to talk about international students. So what happens when there is what do you call that? Police are involved in whatever in their life, right? And again, it's a young international student. What typically happens with that? Do they just get deported right away and that's it, goodbye? Or does it depend on, the kind of student visa they have, etc.? So that case, and then another case where it's an older international student who's a parent and there's police involved.
Yeah.
What happens?
Well, it's actually case by case, right?
Yep.
And I think the severity of why the police is involved matters, right? Is it a speeding ticket versus is it domestic abuse versus is it theft, or right? There's different levels of it. If it's a speeding ticket and right, maybe a slap on the wrist, you pay your fine. not, but if it's something where now the police are involved and now you have to go to maybe jail, they have to put you in. Let's say there's a domestic dispute, right? And so depending on the severity, it could be, okay, well, what is your, status in this country, right? And then from there, it will escalate, whether it means deportation or whether it means, they have to seek refuge somewhere else. Like there's different things depending on what is case by case. To be quite honest, a younger person usually it's speeding tickets, right? Very rarely will you see, like murder, gunshots, like things that are a bit more severe. And usually when it gets to things that are severe like that, they leave themselves. They don't actually wait for the police to get involved. They know what they committed is a big offense and they will take themselves out before the police can even start looking for them, right? But if it's things like speeding ticket or maybe shoplifting, right? Things that are not, even for domestic, people who live here are not very, in terms of like levels of gravity, not so high, then usually they kind of get the same kind of treatment. But once it's something where someone's life is at risk, right? You're harming someone, harming yourself, threats of, one kind or harassment, like different levels of it, then yes, then they kind of look into, okay, now who are you? What are you here for? Right? Maybe you don't deserve to be here anymore. These are the grounds on which you are here. You have gone outside of these grounds. Therefore, these are the next kind of the punishments or consequences for your acts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. Somebody in the chat has brought up the issue of these teenagers, especially in the GTA, who they end up in the street because for whatever reason, there's something happened with their guardian or their parent or whatever. And in some cases, only to find out that actually they don't have legal status in Canada. How does that work? Can you tell us about that? About citizenship and, well, either of you, but I'll start with Olaitan and then you can jump in, you can chime in.
Yeah, so we've even seen a case, let me bring it from because working in a regulated territory, I would want to base my experiences on legal precedences of what has happened before, rather than subjective opinion of myself. Mm-hmm. So we have seen instances where young person defined by United Nations, the Charter as under 18, we had a case of a young guy that came into Canada. Like the parents literally, because of the challenges they're having in their own country, they asked him to come to Canada. I think he was 16 at that time. And such person is under the category of people we see on the streets. So that this legal situation can help us to understand what their rights could be and how they could approach it in terms of maybe their carer looking for, legal help or legal aid for them. This person was 16 and he came into Canada to apply for PR based on a well-rounded fear, of persecution. And his application was declined on the ground. Yes, the cases here is also one of the celebrated cases upon which Baker versus Canada also, takes, is called Kantasamy versus Canada. A young guy called Tammy from Sri Lanka applied for refugee protection and he was refused, because the officer felt like he could be taken care of, so to say, and all that. But this case was actually overturned by the Supreme Court again, because several organizations, including Parkdale Community Legal Services in Ontario, they intervened in these instances. So the decision in Kantasamy is one that has given hope that if we have young kids as defined under the law as age under 18, even Canadian law, I think we still have dependents to be up to age 22, such legal precedents could be used as the basis to present, a case for Canadian to look into such and put such application for refugee protection formally. If the child does not know their status, but they could attest to the fact that their parent brought them in at a time T, or we have some people that could establish that they came in at a time T with these parents who is deemed without status, right? And if the evidence is there that it was based on a persecution, a rounded fear that if I return to my home country, this is what is going to happen to me, the law is clear. Such people deserves a hearing. And also Article 15 and 3 on United Nations Charter on Human Rights, it gives that opportunity for children under the definition of the age to be able to express themselves. Please seek help. Though you can't be your own, advocate in the law court when it comes to some legal terms and all that. I am not a lawyer, but I have read, I love to read. I love to do a lot of, read legal cases to help me to base my arguments. And that's what I do when I argue for my client. So it is possible, seek help, seek support, and don't lie. Misrepresentation is a huge offense under Section 40 of Immigration Act. I think it's Section 40, one of the sections there. Misrepresentation could even lead to a ban, you know. And if it is established that your case is something that needs to be heard, you are not guilty of Section 34, which is like organized crime. You are not also from a country where there is, international violations of human rights and all that. Chances are your case will be heard if you take it through the regular refugee board or any of the appeal processes.
But again, like, be vigilant and make sure I'm I'm very paranoid about my paperwork. Has this expired? Is this expired? Is this expired? Is this still good? Am I in good standing, et cetera, et cetera? It should be sort of a way of life to understand that, your paperwork has to be in order at any given time, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Bolu, okay, so recently, there've been a lot of media stories of, these premiers who are complaining that including my own in Quebec, that the housing crisis is being compounded by international students and immigrants. What are your thoughts?
I do feel that there is definitely a housing crisis, but I think it is beyond the international students and the immigrants. It's just very unfortunate that when they get here, that's another compounding issue on top of all the other issues that they're facing with and having to deal with and having to, get accustomed to the environment and trying to figure out how the system works. I literally know students who I teach in Kitchener, and I have students who have told me, oh, I have to leave class early because I have to get a ride to Windsor. And I'm like, Windsor? That is how many hours away? Right? But Windsor is cheaper in terms of, getting a spot that is affordable. Maybe they're paying $300 a month for rent and they can't afford to pay that in Kitchener because they don't have that money. So instead they go into further, places that are a bit more, that are further, right? So and some people will tell you, I can't come to school. I don't have money for a ride, or I'm currently living in a shelter. I have people said that they're living in shelters. And it's a big issue, right? There's not enough jobs for them. They, again, probably did not come with the right information in terms of what life would be when they got here, and maybe only prepared for the first month thinking things would, figure themselves out, only to get here, be disappointed and be frustrated and not know what to do. So there is a huge housing crisis. We don't have enough, we don't have enough, housing for these students, even on campus.
Affordable, especially affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not affordable. Right now, even if you wanted to be on campus, there's a waiting list, a ridiculous long waiting list, and it's not cheap. And for some schools, they will tell you this is only for the first semester or the first year. We only give it to the first years, right? So you still have to sort yourself out. You can't stay there the full 4 years or 2 years or however long your program is, right? And it's incredibly expensive. So there is an issue. There's a huge issue crisis. And I know that there was a time where the government was putting the onuses on the schools, where if you're going to bring them in, then you need to have, the space for them as well. You can't just be bringing in a whole bunch of international students in, and then there's nowhere to put them. So if you're going to get all this money for international students, use some of that money to build more campuses where they can stay, right? But you know that if they do that, that means that the money they're going to pay, right? They're still going to get their money back in some way. The whole thing at the end of the day boils down to money. And you have people, 12 people living in a 2-bedroom basement, paying $300, $200 a month. They just need a place to lay down, right? So there's no space, and they're lining up for jobs, right? I see it every day in my workplace. You'll see so many students lined up for one job, and it's just, I can see the frustration from the kids or the students, just being on, maybe dreams that were sold to them, and they just thought it would be somehow, when they realize it's not, and they're trying to get themselves together, and they're realizing that they can't. What do I do back home? I can't tell mommy and daddy they don't have the money. They sold everything to send me here. I have to make it. I don't know how, but I have to, right? And then you start seeing, like, illegal activity and things like that. They get frustrated, they have to drop out. I know as a professor, when I'm marking papers, it's a lot of AI generated content. They're not even doing their work because they don't have time. They don't come to class, they don't know, but they can't fail. So it's just to do the assignment, copy and paste. And then you hear the excuses, and it's like, now you're failing, you're gonna have to pay for this again, and it's expensive, you don't have the money for it, you need to pay your rent, you have to go back and forth. So it's a lot. It is a lot, but I feel like research is one of the biggest things that is missing.
Big vicious cycle, and then them being used as the scapegoats by politicians, to distract us from the problems they are not solving. And let's go back to Olaitan to talk about temporary workers are another group that that have been in the news for not good reasons. And the government recently implemented rules to limit the number coming in, partly the housing reason being one of the reasons. So how do people, like, generally, how do people get into these programs? How do people immigrate here for work reasons?
Right. So oftentimes we could attribute such as a need-based. Say, for instance, you have certain employers who are unable to fill some crucial skills needs that helps them to continue to stay in operation. They would have to go through ESDC, a department of Government of Canada, to walk through what we call an LMIA process, which is a labor market impact assessment that helps an employer to explain to the Government of Canada that having searched and put out recruitment opportunities, I was unable to hire a Canadian, I was unable to hire a permanent resident or even a refugee. And the only way is for me to work with a skill set that is available abroad. There is also the one that is called the Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program, wherein, workers are needed to help. We all know that food is also one of the sustenance of everybody, food is life. They want to ensure that the agri sector is not lacking the skill sets needed to make food available, to address food scarcity. So for me, there are different things that have happened in the past that has made the lawmaker to look into reviewing that approach. Sometimes we have seen certain countries, they've been in the news, wherein they have also messed up by putting a price tag to people who are meant to get the job. So we see some agents putting a price tag to the LMIA process, say, oh, you know what, I can help you to come to Canada, and they will be charging and they will be billing those people, to pay for that position. That has been in the news. The government is aware of that, and they are trying to make sure that in the light of it all, we are saying that there are too many people in the system. The housing issue is a critical factor, and we already have a lot of international students also who are looking to work. How then do we, at this point in time, respond to the temporary side So one of the things now is to put a bit of stricter measures on the foreign workers stream and say, hey, let's start from Canadian. If we can't get from them, let's look at PR. If we can't get from PR, let's look at refugee. Let's look at the people that are the spousal, that are on spousal open work permits for international students. Let's tap into that. And if they're not available, what about the postgraduate work permit holder? The goal is still to ensure that people inside are still the first people considered before we look outward. But then it is clear that following COVID, a lot of people experience burnout in the workplace. And that has literally led to the Great Resignation, the Great Resignation era that we're seeing. It's made so many people leave, and majority Canadians. And the goal is now tilting towards making sure the current temporary resident that cannot get work, they get the job. But the question we want to ask ourselves is, in terms of recruitment, the reality is certain set of people, due to their skin color, they still get screened out of the recruitment process. So how then do we say, truly speaking, these international students that are inside the system, or the people with the work permits or status, how are they still going to get the job? I have it on record, data driven. A lot of my clients, families whose spouse came through with spousal open work permits, on average in a week, they turn in at least 30 applications and they don't get the job. So what are we saying? Do we really think that the rules we put out there is really helping and ensuring that even the employers, quote and unquote, they are using the fair principles in the job process? That's a food for thought I will leave here, but I just feel like it is doable only if we look beyond this, the systemic racism around recruitment and all that we have. It is achievable, but then how then do we get the lawmakers that are saying, let's do this, to go deep into some of those things?
Yeah,
root cause factor.
Yeah, there certainly seems to be a lack of political will. I don't want us to run out of time before we address a question that was posed. Somebody wants to know, how do you help newcomers, prepare them to avoid Children's Aid Society apprehension of their children? And also, how do you help them mitigate bias from police, from the education system, from the healthcare system, etc.? This is a question for both of you. Dr. Bolu?
I think one of the major things, I wish there was like, in a perfect world, before they come here, there's like a course they can take. I can give them all the information they need, so when they get here, the transition is a lot easier for them. But unfortunately, that isn't available yet. So a lot of it is due diligence. They're going to have to go and do their research. If you know you're coming here as a student with your dependent, do your research. What is available for you? Start making those connections, contacts, reaching out to them. You can't use the phone, you can send emails, right? And getting that information. So it makes the transition a little bit smoother for you. If not, you will get here, you'll be frustrated, and you'll most likely get yourself in trouble because you'll do something that, unknown to you, is wrong, right? And the repercussions for that could be them taking your children, could be you being deported, could be, something that will cost and make your experience here very terrible. Right. So please, I do encourage you to do your due diligence. Don't listen on he said, she said, oh, my cousin or my friend. Do your own research, because sometimes we don't give everyone the whole story. We just give them parts. So don't worry about it when you get here. Yeah, just put them in school. I did that. And that's what happened for me. Not knowing the channels that this person had to go to in order for that to happen. And then you just think you come here and you just drop your kids off and you go. Right. So again, they need to do their due diligence and doing the research. And it's not easy, right? Everyone wants fast, quick. Just tell me how you did it. Oh, just do it for me, right? But this is something you're investing in. This is your life, your children's life. You need to take that time. It's not just about getting the money together and putting the application together to an agent and coming and getting the stamp on your, passport. What happens after you get off that plane? What happens that first week of class, right? you need to prepare for that. So they need to do their research, ask questions, ask. Don't just go with, oh, the headline from a Twitter account or the headline from an Instagram post. Do your due diligence.
Mm-hmm. Olaitun?
I want to tell you, I want to share with you some feedback that I got from surveys that I have done in the past. Given that when I said I started my journey of advising even before I became a consultant, I've realized that certain people that were able to come through to Canada with me, at some point in time, they ran into issues wherein the system, because of lack of understanding and sensitivity to their cultural differences, have literally made certain decisions that instead of unifying the family, literally separated the family. And at the center of this issue are the children, and which has affected the mental health of these children. And 3-4 days ago, I was talking to someone, and even overnight, I had the opportunity of speaking with people that are in the Ontario School District Board. And there are some lived experiences also of the school district board when it comes to the targets, the children, children of the Black and the Indigenous. I have this data given to me that says that, let me just read it. The person is a trainer for the Ontario Association of Children Aid Society. The focus on equity and anti-Black racism. Many immigrants become target of the system because these child aid society workers do not understand the cultural differences. And this for me is huge for us. And statistics again in Ontario about up until 2-3 years ago says 80% taken away from home are Indigenous and Black. Out of that, we have 40% that are Black kids. This makes us to know that in reality, as Black parents also, we need to look at it and tell ourselves, how do we get ourselves prepared? Dr. Bolu had already given us the right hint. In fact, I believe if there will be a mandatory, it's not even like educating, if there's going to be like a mandatory 101 arrival course, for Black parents from all like Brazilian, Jamaican, anywhere you're coming from, our culture is different. And that's the reason also for Canada, when we're talking about multiculturalism, the intercultural competency training needs to go deep down again to have representation. When we have representation, then we begin to say, I understand the nuances of this culture. I know what it is when it comes to like discipline, what it comes to know when there is a red line that is being drawn. You don't take the culture of an immigrant and use it as something you're going to use to box them into a category of bringing them into the should we say the prison system, making them like a prisoner because this is their culture. For me, that is also racism, right? So I think we need to be able to understand each culture. I know an organization in New Brunswick, Purge, they learn about the immigrant way and they also teach people the Canadian way. That is a way to go. It's not just me learning Canadian. Learn about the immigrants to understand, okay, if this is what you do, what about if we do it this way? Spanking is this, and take them through the journey. Don't just say because you did this, then we're taking away your children. The children you're taking away, mind you, you are also trying to damage something. You're taking something away from them. Mm-hmm. The values they have grown up to, the parents they wake up to. And I'm not saying, and I'm not condoning anything, domestic violence or whatever it is, but the onus lies on us to exercise the duty of care, to go in there to understand and be sensitive, because the children you think you are helping, you're eventually going to put them on the streets. When you cannot understand their identity, you want to put them into a different identity. Learning is a gradual process. They cannot unlearn who they are by way of you taking them to one foster home, another foster home, another foster home. I think I need to stop here.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. Well, we're running out of time here, and I'd like us to end on a positive and empowering note. So, Dr. Bolu, you said you deal a lot with, the mental health issues that international students face. What positive message would you have for them?
The positive message I would have is hang in there. It's not easy. right? Coming to a new country and having to deal with so many different things from, status, color. Some people, they've never been exposed to people from other races, their cultures, other religions. It can be very overwhelming, right? Maybe they don't have a proper support system. So not only would I encourage them to look out for, resources that are available, support systems that are available for them, but also to have hope. Hang in there. It's not easy. But I can guarantee that with time, when you start to understand the system and you start to realize, okay, this is where to go for this is where to go for that, it'll make the experience a lot more richer. And hopefully you'll be able to pass down that information to others that are also coming to join as well, right? We shouldn't gatekeep, but it will get better. It will definitely get better. Hang in there. You're not the first. You won't be the last. And, the difference between you and someone who chose to give up and go back home is patience, right? We need to give it patience to understand things, to get accustomed to things. So just, again, there's so much support out there, whether it's on Facebook, whether there's meetings, churches, mosques, temples, communities, student union services, your neighbors. I don't want to greet my neighbor. I don't know them. Know them. Get to know them. These are people that, if anything, God forbid, happens, they're going to call and say, I need help with so-and-so, right? So please make yourself aware, right? And just put yourself out there and things will get better. Just hang in there.
Thanks for that. Olaitan?
Thank you. Please educate yourself. Education, education, education. Find your tribe. And just sometimes it makes sense to be vulnerable. Share how you feel. Don't bottle it in, because oftentimes it puts a lot of pressure on us. And when the outburst happens, it could be something that could, affect the family dynamics. In my community, there are a lot of we are very small. We're very, the Black population is not as you would have it in cities like Ontario, but there is help. We have the Newcomer Center across cities in New Brunswick. We have Black-led organizations that are coming up. Battle of the Heart New Brunswick is an organization that helps youth, young individuals, immigrants, and all that, to put their energy into something productive through the work of heart. We have the Black Business and Professional Network. We have Pure Gold Foundation that is helping to build a well-rounded youth, making sure they have positive affirmations. Please find your tribe according to what Dr. Pulu said. I am always available. I try my best possible to take my people, everybody, immigrant, through this journey, using myself as that laboratory specimen. Feel free to reach out to me. We would always support. And if it is too much, get help, seek professional advice, go to your Newcomer Center organization. If you have mental health support system, request for it, ask. The worst you could get is we don't have it, but we'd ask around. Help is on the way. Don't give up. You've come too far to give up now. Thanks.
Thank you both so much for this extremely informative information. And I'd like to send a shout out to some of the professionals you mentioned, all of the settlement counselors. There are a few in our chat here. The settlement counselors, those neighbors and tutors in tutoring programs that help these children and young people, the people who volunteer in shelters, the amazing churches who have been trying to help those African immigrants who've, actually refugees who found themselves on the street and have provided temporary shelter for them when there was none available from the city, etc. Shout out to all of you. Thank you so much for the work you do. And thank you, the audience, those of you who asked questions, those of you who watched us live. And yeah, great conversation. Thank you so much.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine.